Hello, this is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk to you about that greatest hit of 1570, Thomas Tallis's 40-voice motet, Spem in Alium. Now, what is a Spem in Alium? Or, more to the point, what is a motet? Who was Thomas Tallis, aside from the guy that Vaughan Williams wrote a gorgeous piece of string music, who wrote a tune that Vaughan Williams used? Well, let's start at the beginning. All right? Thomas Tallis was one of the great composers of the golden age of English sacred polyphony, which was the 16th century, basically the 1500s. He lived from 1505 to 1585, which is a good long period of time for those days. And he was one of two really amazingly outstanding composers. There were really quite a bunch of them, and it was a very successful school of composition. But his main companion and sort of competitor was William Byrd, who also lived for a good long time and wrote a lot of music. And there's a lot of sort of friendly competition between fans of one versus the other. You know, the Tallis men versus the Byrd watchers, you might want to call them. But they worked together. They were Catholic composers who found themselves having to write quite a bit of music in English for the Anglican Rite, because this was, of course, the period when Henry VIII founded the Anglican Church and broke with the Pope. And so it was a time of great religious turmoil, which usually makes for good music. Turmoil in general makes for good music, and Thomas Tallis's was no exception. Now, Spem in Alium is a motet. A motet is simply a brief work based on sacred words to be sung by any number of voices, with or without instruments. You know, the definition has changed over the centuries as different musical styles have come into fashion. But the piece basically lasts from 9 to 12 minutes, depending on the performance. What makes it so remarkable is that it's composed in 40 real parts, which is a lot of parts. Let's face it, that's a lot of parts. It may have been written as a sort of response to an informal challenge issued by the Italian composer Alessandro Striggio, who wrote a 40-voice motet called Ecce Beatam Lucem that Tallis may have known. It was apparently performed in the 1560s in Munich. Some people knew it. Striggio was a very famous composer of the day. His best-known work was the madrigal opera The Gossip of the Women at the Laundry. I am not kidding. You can go look on Wikipedia if you don't believe me. It's there. The Gossip of the Women at the Laundry is his madrigal drama sort of thing. Anyway, he wrote a 40-voice motet and a 40/60-voice mass, which was recently discovered in the early 2000s and recorded. And all of this stuff is out there. There is an amazing amount of variety and richness in this repertoire, but most people don't know it terribly well. And the wonderful thing about Tallis's motet, Spem in Alium, is that it really reveals to us just what the wonderful potential of this kind of writing is on a very grand scale. And you hear the same kinds of contrasts of texture and harmony and line and counterpoint. You know, so you might see this is contrast, you know, in hand motion. But you see these same kinds of contrasts in works on a smaller scale. But at least in this piece, it's all displayed there on an epic canvas, and it doesn't take a heck of a lot of time. Now, performances are usually for 40 unaccompanied voices, obviously. I mean, you can double the voices, or you can substitute instruments for voices. You can do all kinds of things with it. You can add an organ sort of baseline accompaniment. All of this has been done. But the purest form of the work, let's face it, is for 40 unaccompanied voices. And I think it sounds best that way. I really do, because it allows you to hear what you can do with what is effectively an orchestra of voices. The variety of textures and contrasting lines, it's just wonderful. It's absolutely amazing. The 40 voices are divided up into 8 5-part choirs. And, it's often performed in the round, which makes it, wonderful for like surround sound recording now. And we'll talk about some of those too. So that's the piece. And I want to play you a little bit of it so that you just get a sense of what it sounds like. One of the hallmarks of the English school of polyphony from this period was the use of very high treble parts. That is, these high sopranos. They would have been boy sopranos probably in the day, or falsettists of some kind. Happily, we can use women now who are able to reach the stratosphere far more effortlessly and with a lot more artfulness of phrasing than probably the boys of the day could. But in any case, it gives the music a wonderful ethereal quality. I mean, what we associate with heavenly, spiritual kind of things. And you really, really hear it in this piece. And so I'm going to play you just a few seconds of the opening. It's just so you get a sense of how the parts begin to enter one after the other in all the choirs. It's just extraordinary. Listen to this. Okay, so that's the opening. But as the work proceeds, we begin to hear some of the ways in which Tallis can diversify and exploit his textures. For example, there are antiphonal sections where call and response, from across the room, basically the choirs, call to each other and answer to each other. Here's a little bit of that. And then finally, there are moments where there is actually a sense of drama. I mean, this is not the kind of music where, especially in sacred music, where you wanted necessarily drama. You wanted to hear the words, you wanted to hear, the spiritual quality of the music. You didn't necessarily want to have, the kind of emotion that you hear in, say, Pagliacci or Cavalleria Rusticana. But even here, with the sudden use of pause and the sudden entry of the entire forces all at once on a big resonant chord, you get extraordinary results. Listen to this moment here. Okay, so you get a sense now of what it sounds like. And the only other thing that we need to do before we talk about recordings is to talk about the words. The words are really very straightforward. I actually thought, because it had the word Alium, which is Latin for like onion. It's the genus from which you get onions and garlic and shallots and things like that. I thought, oh well, it's a motet about gardening, which is very English. I thought that would be absolutely perfect. Turns out it's a different Alium. It's one L instead of two. It makes a difference. The words in English are, and it's a brief text, it's, I have never put my hope in another except you, God of Israel, who will be angry yet become gracious, and all the sins of man in suffering you forgive. Lord God, creator of heaven and earth, look on our humility. Very, very simple and beautiful text. And the setting, doesn't really necessarily reflect anything in the words other than that sense of prayerfulness. I mean, that's what this is. It's a prayer. So let's talk about some recordings. Now, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, I have 5 or 6 of them here. There are lots of them. It's been recorded many times now. It's been done in the Kronos Quartet did it. It's been arranged in lots of different ways. It's been overdubbed a million times to get the 40 parts. But it really is an English specialty, and English groups have traditionally done it best, although the Huelgas Ensemble, Paul Van Nevel's group, did a wonderful version on a disc called 40 Voices that was full of, large works for lots of people written during this period. But the first one I have is the Oxford Camerata with Jeremy Summerlee on Naxos. That's this one. And the version that you get is going to depend to a certain extent on what else you want with it, what the couplings are. This particular recording features another motet, Salve Intemerata, which is the longest single movement written in the entire 16th century. It's not in 40 parts, but it's about 23 minutes long, which is the same length as like the opening movement of Mahler's Second Symphony. I mean, it's a major, major extended piece. It's a very, very serious piece. And then there's Spem in Alium, and also the Missa Salve Intemerata, which is a mass, which is based on the motet. That's how you know, because they have the same name. And that's a very nice disc, which is worth considering if those are the couplings you want. If you are interested in the religious controversies of the period and how Tallis became one of the first composers to set religious texts in English, then this recording with the Cardinall's Musick under Andrew Carwood on Hyperion is an interesting choice. It also comes with a work called Sing and Glorify. Now, Sing and Glorify might be quite familiar because it's Spem in Alium, only they took away the Latin words and substituted English words, so you get to hear it twice. For some reason, all of the recordings of Sing and Glorify that I've ever heard tend to be faster than Spem in Alium. They take less time. I don't, can't explain why. Next, we have this terrific disc with the 16, Harry Christopher's group, called Music for Monarchs and Magnates. This gives you music by Gibbons, Bird, Tompkins, and Thomas Tallis, Spem in Alium. And you also get Sing and Glorify, but with some of the vocal parts replaced by instruments of the period. Cornets and sackbuts and snosberries and, all of those things. But you can hear it two ways, and this is an SACD. So you can hear it in surround sound if you want to be surrounded by your Spem in Alium. Now, if you are a major, major Thomas Tallis junkie, I mean a Tallis fanatic, there is a complete set of the complete Tallis here on Brilliant Classics. This features the Chapelle du Roi under Alistair Dixon, and it's basically 10 discs of stuff. It gives us everything that Tallis wrote that survives, and a wonderful series it is. I mean, Tallis was a major, major composer, and if you want to investigate him more thoroughly, here's an easy and not too expensive way to do it. And so that's available, and I wanted to let you know. However, there's always a however. If you really want my favorite Spem in Alium, and I do have a favorite, it's the one I've been playing you examples from. You might have guessed. It's the Tallis Scholars, the group that's named after the composer. This was, I think, their first recording issued on their own label, Gimell, and it blew everybody away, and deservedly so. Now, this is a disc of shorter sacred works by Thomas Tallis, all in Latin, his Latin sacred music, starting with Spem in Alium, and I think this performance is so beautiful. It may be because, well, it's not the first one I heard, but it's the first one I heard that really blew me away, that didn't sound like some giant mush. A friend of mine said to me, when he first heard the piece, it sounded like two chords, they're just alternating two chords. It needs to have clarity. there is exquisite singing by the trebles on top, the women of the Tallis scholars who have these beautiful, pure voices. And it's a dramatic performance. Peter Phillips really knows how to alter the dynamics and create a sense of tension by allowing us to hear the shifting densities and choral groupings that Tallis is working with. And when they all come in with that last line, about how wonderful it is to be humble, the word is respice, that they all come in on respice. And it's like, oh, wow. Yeah, I played it for you. You heard it. It's thrilling. It's absolutely thrilling. And so that is the recording. This is the recording of Spem in Alium that I recommend first and foremost with the Tallis scholars on Gimell. It's a knockout. It really is a knockout. So keep on listening, folks. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Enjoy Thomas Tallis, Spem in Alium. It ain't about onions.